Practicing with Integrity, where we highlight the pioneering spirit of modern dentistry and offer a comprehensive view of the techniques and technologies at the forefront of dental science. In Practicing with Integrity, we serve a dual purpose. First, we celebrate innovation by showcasing the pioneering spirit of modern dentistry by highlighting the advancements in techniques and technologies that are shaping the field. Here we explore the cutting edge of dental science and the individuals driving its progress. Think of it as a place to discover the next big thing and the thought leaders behind it. Second, providing comprehensive knowledge, offering a deep dive into these innovative techniques and technologies, giving dental professionals a comprehensive understanding of how they work, their benefits, and their applications. It aims to bridge the gap between theory and practice, offering practical insights and actionable knowledge that listeners can use to improve their own practices and patient care. It's a resource for continuing education and staying at the forefront of the field. In short, Practicing with Integrity is where the future of dentistry meets the practical application of that future. It inspires by showcasing what's possible and empowers by providing the knowledge to make it a reality. Welcome to Practicing with Integrity, where we highlight the pioneering spirit of modern dentistry and offer a comprehensive view of the techniques and technologies at the forefront of dental science. My guest for episode 5 is my dear friend, Dr. Scott Perkins, prosthodontist. Currently, he's a prosthodontic support specialist for the doctors at the Clear Choice Dental Implant Centers network. Dr. Perkins, originally from Southern California, you obtained your dental degree from Marquette University, and then you stayed in Milwaukee and obtained your prosthodontic advanced certificate in prosthodontics under the mentorship of one of the most recognized clinicians in the field of removable prosthodontics, Dr. Glenn McKivney. And I want to get to that back later because that must have been quite the treat. Let's go to growing up in Southern California, surfing, muscle cars, and music. I never met your parents, but you have shared so many stories about them, especially your father, that it says, I have lived with them, some of these stories. I know that your dad instilled in you an incredible work ethic. Tell me about his impact in your life and your professional career.
Well, that'll be a tough one to talk about without getting too emotional. My father and I were best friends. I think that's where it starts. He was very focused on if you want something, you aren't just given it. You need to work for it. And so my first job was a paper route when I was 12 or 13 years old. And I'm not sure there's a time since then that I haven't worked. I was into cars, as you mentioned. There were times that I had several cars at once, which I had to pay for. I can remember my first car, 1967 Camaro Super Sport. My mom paid $1,200 for it and handed me a coupon book to make sure that I paid every month for it, and so she got it back. So I don't know there's a time in my life when I haven't made a car payment, but it started when I was 15 and a half years old. My father was just a unique individual. He was a kind man. He was in the Navy. When he left the Navy in San Diego, which is where he and my mom met, he worked for Yamaha International as the head of the electronics division for 25 years. And that's where he retired from. He would do anything for his family. And that's probably where that came from. I admired my father tremendously. I've told you a lot of stories. There's just tons of them. He knew when to be a little bit harder on me than others, when to let it go. Probably my biggest mistake in my life is when I was in trouble, was trying to run away from trouble, and he caught me halfway over the neighbor's fence. That was a mistake I didn't make again. When my father passed away, I told a story that I'll share that is just one of my favorite stories, if that's okay. He had a Studebaker. I was 15. The parents were leaving for the weekend. I thought, well, I can drive the Studebaker. But I knew my dad was smart, so I knew he wrote the miles down, so I decided to disconnect the speedometer and take the Studebaker for a drive. When I got it back home, I couldn't fix the speedometer. I thought, well, this is it. I'm in trouble. My father came home for the trip, never mentioned it. He brought it up 25 years later. We were at dinner together. It was having a great dinner, and my dad looked at me and he said, just so you know, you didn't get away with the Studebaker. I know you drove it. But that was just the kind of person he was. There was no reason to get mad at me at the time. Mm-hmm. And that's just a memory that I hold very, very special to myself about choosing your battles in life. You don't always have to fight the battle. Sometimes it's better to put that off.
That is such a great story.
Yeah.
And that's true. There's so many instances that we live on a daily basis about that story. It's just a matter of picking what the ones that are worth and the ones that are not worth. Thanks for sharing that, Scott.
You're welcome.
My goal is to talk to our listeners that are at different stages of their careers and probably on the verge of making moves. Residents that are graduating or people that are in careers and might be moving to a different stage of their career. You've kind of been in multiple different stages. You graduated your residency, you took a position in academia, then you ran a private practice in Colorado for 25 years, then you joined a group practice, and now you're in a position of mentorship. Let's start about your years in academia in Wisconsin. What was the highlight about that position in academia? And I'm going to tie Dr. McGivney to part of this, because I'm sure that there's also some great stories about working with him.
Yeah, I think I loved teaching. I mean, one of the faults that I saw in academia sometimes was teachers speaking above the level of the student that they're working with. You're assuming that they have your knowledge, and they don't. So what I learned was to talk to the audience at their level. And a lot of my work in academia was one-on-one, one-on-two. I had a few larger classes, but mostly it was mostly it was students that were struggling. And they needed a little less extra attention to help them, especially on the clinical side of things. And so that one-on-one is probably where my strength has always been, more so than big group experiences. I feel like I connect reasonably well with people on a one-on-one level and can be helpful in that way. So I'd like to see more of that connection in the teachings that I see in dental schools instead of larger groups. Smaller groups I think are beneficial. I mean, you saw in my CV, I went to Whittier College. I mean, there was 1,200 students. I had classes with 4 people in them. I think that that's something that we've lost a little bit in education, that smaller group experience. I think you do better with.
Now, talking about those years that you were in academia and fast forwarding to where you are right now, okay, with all of what you've learned, all of what you've lived, what's that class that you wish you had been sitting in as a student that would have prepared you for the career that you had, but you didn't get to take because it wasn't offered, because it wasn't available, and now you wish that class is being given to students?
It has to be something in business. I mean, I think they do a reasonable job in the clinical aspect of things, but you go out and you have contracts if you're buying a practice. If you open your own practice, you have use taxes and city taxes and all these things that you don't have any knowledge of. I learned trial and error. I usually learned when an auditor called me and said, Dr. Perkins, you haven't paid any use taxes for the last 3 years. What's a use tax? So I think if they focused at least some on the business aspects, because we're providing a service and we want to take good care of our patients, but it is a business, and you have to know those pieces of it. You could be a great clinician and fail as a businessman. So I think you have to have both of those pieces.
Yeah, I agree with you. Probably the other one that I would add is some form of leadership class.
No question.
Whether you're running a small office or a big group of people, I think that's one that I would certainly
totally agree with you.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Fast forward, after those few years in academia, you moved to Colorado and Fort Collins. That's the city where the Universal Time Clock is located.
Correct.
And it's funny why I know that, but anyways, I know that. What led you there, and how did you start your practice there?
Well, I had bought a practice in Denver.
Okay.
That I bought it from somebody that didn't exactly tell me the truth about a lot of things, which is why I brought up the business aspect of things. So there was a business learning experience there. There was a legal learning experience there. Fort Collins was an hour north. And so while I was running the practice in Denver, I opened a satellite office in Fort Collins. At that time, there were no prosthodontists in northern Colorado. There was nobody in Wyoming. The prosthodontic practice in Fort Collins took off immediately because of the need. So I left the practice in Denver behind to somebody else that was also there. So I basically started that practice from scratch. I had an orthodontist that owned a medical park, and he was dying to have a specialist from every field in that park. And so he really wanted me there. And so I started in his office.
That's a perfect setup.
Yeah, I started in his office. He had a big office, and so I was there 2 days a week and then 3 days a week. And pretty soon I needed to build an office within that complex. So I slowly built the practice over years. And again, I was there for 25 years.
So for the listeners that are in the process of starting a practice, how does that work? How do you work those relationships of collaborating with the specialists that you were involved with, but as a prosthodontist, looking for referrals from general dentists and finding those specialists that you want to work with? What would you say to these listeners?
I'm sure it's a little different today. I was fortunate being the only one. So the community was dying for somebody they could refer to that they didn't have to drive all the way to Denver. So that was fortunate for me. As years went on, then it gets a little more challenging to more like what today would probably be, which is social connections. Taking somebody out to lunch. You can't just expect it to come your direction. Refer something out and then set up a lunch meeting. I have friends that do golf outings with people. I'm a terrible golfer, but I've never done it that way. For me, it was more direct social involvement. I gave some lectures to the community, some in Wyoming with the different dental groups, just so people would know who I was. So I think you have to make social connections with people. Doesn't mean that you have to be actively going out and doing things all the time, but they need to know who you are and what you stand for. We talked about integrity in your beginning. I mean, you've got to show people that you have that you're focused on doing the right thing for the patient. And if it requires a referral to a periodontist or an endodontist or an oral surgeon, that you do those things to build those relationships. Having those relationships makes the job more fun. There's no question. If you stay isolated in just your own little cubicle, you don't have people to bounce ideas off of. You don't have that connection with people that makes you want to do better all the time. That's how I felt about it.
Were you practicing the whole scope of prosthodontics?
I was doing fixed removable implants, some maxillofacial at the time, some hospital work, working with some of the ENT doctors and surgeons. Maxillofacial just became a little bit more challenging because you'd get a call at 11 o'clock, I need an obturator done now.
Mm-hmm.
So the surgeons decide at the last minute they're going to do this stuff. So that from a business perspective became more difficult as my practice got busier.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, I had the time to do that, and I did most of my own lab work, so I could do those things. So slowly eliminated maxillofacial from the workflow.
And back in the late 80s, early 90s, as you got involved with dental implants, the original principle was you were working with oral surgeons primarily.
Correct.
Maybe a few periodontists. That was the way that it was being worked.
I would say 99% oral surgeons at the time. Periodontists were doing more single implants than they were full arches.
Okay. And how did you see that transition?
From oral surgeons to periodontists doing
Correct.
more and more and more?
Yeah.
I think as periodontists became more comfortable with single implants, they realized, hey, I can do this. I don't know back in the day if I did any what we would consider full fixed arch restorations with periodontists during that time. They were much less common.
Mm-hmm.
Bosker system was out, which is a submandibular implant. We did a number of those. Oral surgeons are going to do those in hospital. So I wouldn't say there was, during my 25 years, that there was a big push into periodontics doing full mouth fixed in my location. Mm-hmm. It stuck with oral surgeons mostly.
Mm-hmm. And then in 2011, you relocated to your stomping grounds, Southern California, and you joined the Clear Choice Network as the lead prosthodontist in the San Diego Center.
Correct.
And absorbed and took that full arch restorative process, bull by the horns. Tell me about that experience of leading a center and leading that group of people and embracing that process.
Very, very different experience after 25 years of cutting crown preps and making partials, going to, in essence, one particular procedure, and a procedure that I was taught doesn't work. Back then it was, you can't do this. And so I needed to learn a whole new thought process. I'm an analog guy that was doing full fixed lower arches only on 6 Nobel implants and casting a framework. So this was a very different learning curve for me. In addition, you brought up the leadership aspects of it. That was probably more challenging than the clinical dentistry. Learning the processes of full fixed arch immediate load was not really a difficult thing for me with the experience that I had. But going from running a front office person and one assistant to a huge production facility with 12, 13 people is a whole different animal. And you can maybe sneak through the leadership piece a little bit with just a couple of employees, but when you have a center that's doing this kind of a volume with this many employees, you have to lead that team. Mm-hmm. And that was probably the hardest part for me. Probably took me my move to Phoenix and working with you that taught me, and Dr. Batura, that taught me the leadership piece. I was focused very heavily on the clinical piece, and as long as I'm doing good clinical dentistry, I'm doing my job. But you have this huge family to take care of as well. That's difficult.
Yeah, I was going to lead into that during some of the conferences that we attended and we shared, you kept threatening me with the fact that you were going to retire in Phoenix and that you were going to be working with me at some point. And then I was lucky enough that on Valentine's Day in 2017, you didn't retire.
Yes.
You started working with us, and I was very fortunate that you joined our team. It was humbling for me, I've got to tell you, because I had been working by myself for 9 years, and I knew one way of doing things, my way. And all of a sudden you come, and now I have to admit that there's more than one way of doing things. And this, I think this is important for listeners to understand that are in practices with more than one doctor, or listeners that are planning to bring an associate or a partner. You have to be open to that process and understand that you got to be receptive to the ideas that are brought over, and be able to accept them willingly. And I know it took me a little bit of time, and we had to work on it together. Tell me how it was for you.
It was the same. I mean, I was working with a way to do things for 7 years in San Diego. And I come to this center that I knew was a great center. But things were done a little bit differently. And so I think there was a little push-pull there in the beginning that turned into a top-of-my-career collaborative relationship that will last a lifetime. So, yes, there were some squeaks and rattles in the beginning, but I think when you work together and you collaborate together and you talk it through, so to speak, it made us stronger. There's no question that it made us significantly stronger, both in our interpersonal relationship and our professional relationship. And it benefited our patients tremendously.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think it benefited our team as well, to be able to understand that there's a way of working together, because that's what you're always promoting to the team, the assistants, the lab technicians, the surgical assistants, that you can work as a team. But if they don't see that their doctors can work as a team, then it defeats the whole purpose. As part of our book club, we would read some books, and one of the books that I enjoyed the most reading, and we read it together, was Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And one of the things that touched me the most, and from that book, was understanding that I had to be the owner of that leadership position, that I could share that ownership of that leadership position, but I just couldn't pass the problems on. I needed to find a way of addressing the problems, assuming the responsibility for the problems, and finding a way of addressing them. What was your experience, and what were your take-homes from that book?
Because I'll call it my weak link, was the leadership piece. That book in particular, I read it a couple times. The ownership piece of not blaming others was a big deal to me. That there are times where somebody beneath you, an assistant, somebody else might have made a mistake, but ultimately it falls on you, and you can't run around the office pointing fingers. You're the owner. You take that ownership. For us, we had two different positions. You were the lead. I was the associate. So we got to a point where I pretty much knew what you were going to say for most things. I mean, it was uncanny actually how it developed over years. And I thank you for that, because it made me a better leader, because I saw how you handled certain situations. There's pieces of that in the book and he doesn't say this in the book, but one of our philosophies is lead by walking around. Knowing what's going on around you is really, really important. And that's in the book too. He knows his environment when he's sitting in Fallujah, if you don't know your environment, you're in trouble. And the same thing applies in a larger center. You've got to know what's happening everywhere. You can't be somebody that sits back in an office and expects it all to happen without having your eyes on it from time to time. And that came from the book as well, is awareness. The more things you are aware of, the better you can handle those issues when they come up.
Yeah. And the other important thing is not making excuses.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That will take you nowhere.
And that's our tendency, right?
Yeah.
It's human nature to, it wasn't me, I didn't do that. But if you are the leader of the center, it doesn't really matter. It's on you. And if it's your practice, it's ultimately comes down to you.
Correct. Yeah, and part of that process, and I don't think that in running that office or running my office currently or any position that I've had, the ego stays out the door.
Yes.
There's no reason to bring that in. There's no reason why that needs to be part of the equation. And I think that was also something important that we spoke about and we understood that was critical in our roles in the office, so that anybody could talk to us, either one of us, and obtain pretty much the same answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No question. And like I said, it really got to that where I knew what he was thinking when somebody's talking to me. I knew what he's thinking. He knew what I was thinking. So it allowed us to not be played by different entities, let's put it that way, because they couldn't go to one dad and one mom and get two different answers.
Correct. Yeah. That's typical.
Yeah.
That can happen so easily. But it's easier to break that up.
Yeah.
Without a problem. So then you became the leader of that office, and you had an associate, and you were running the place. Tell me how that leadership position felt.
I wouldn't say that I didn't like it. I didn't like not having you there because we had established that unbelievably perfect, in my opinion, work environment with each other. I mean, I knew what I could go to. You knew what you could go to. You could call me if you needed me to come in on another day. I could call you. It was a perfect situation to an unknown situation. I was prepared much better now for the leadership role than I was when I opened San Diego, which was ClearChoice was a different company then. It was, here's the keys, Scott, good luck. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of training. I can't remember what center it was, maybe 13 or 14. Now the doctors that join ClearChoice have a whole different set of support roles that are in place to help them. So we didn't have that. But now I had what I felt was the knowledge full circle to handle anything. And again, because of your help and Dr. Butura's help. So the leadership piece wasn't a difficult piece, but it was now experiencing what you experienced, which was a new person that was relatively new out of school, that knew all of this digital technology, and I was an analog guy. And so being open-minded to learn that.
You're a gamer. So
yeah, I mean, I like playing video games, but this was still very, very different. So I made a point of when our printers arrived and all that, I was the one that unboxed them. I was the one that played around with them. I was the one that did everything because I knew that the new doctor knew all this, and I needed to learn it. And it took a little while to do that. I look at printing now. I know how it works technically. It still looks like magic to me, but it's just like, wow, that's just magic.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it further, but I think that's probably the biggest push in dentistry now is the change in technology, some in materials still. We've gone through waves over the years where it was all changes in materials, not a lot of push in technologies. It was there, but it was slow. Now it's just a whirlwind of digital technology approaches. And I think you got to be open to that. So that was the hardest part for me. Mm-hmm. The new doctor didn't really push me on running things, challenging my leadership pieces. So that wasn't an issue at all. but you had somebody that looked at things extremely differently. And it took a little while to, same thing as us, to get us on the same page. And it actually required more from me as the lead than this person as the associate, because it was technology they knew and I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit reversed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, teaching this new person leadership, because that's relatively new out of school. That's, as you mentioned earlier, that's not something that's particularly taught well.
Yeah, it's an exchange of education based on what you have in the bank.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I wanted to talk about that, the evolution of technology that you've seen throughout your career. Because of course, I mean, and you made a really good point. You saw an evolution of materials, but it's only in the last 10, 15 years that we've seen an incredible push in the evolution of technology. We were casting for decades, and all of a sudden now we're milling, and now it's milling different materials. So there's been an incredible change in our specialty, of course, in the whole industry that has come upon us in the last 15, 18 years, which is incredible. And I mean, it's enjoyable.
It is. I mean, I'm a border mold with stick compound on a custom tray and rubber base impression material guy. That's where I was trained, or zinc oxide eugenol impressions for dentures. I mean, so I'm way back there, which was McGivney, so that I still believe in those technologies, those old, I call them technologies, those old procedures. I think that probably towards the end of my 25 years in private practice, I want to say maybe the last 3 years, CEREC had come out. And so I bought a CEREC machine, and it was relatively new then. I mean, it was, it's gotten a lot better. I did it because I needed to learn something new. For 20 years, I'd been taking impressions. Yeah, maybe it changed from hydrocolloid to polyvinyls to polyethers. Maybe it changed that, but it was all the same. So I'm like, I just need to do something different.
It was the same process.
Same process. Yeah. So my main reason for going to CEREC at that time was I just wanted to do something new and learn something new. And I think that's something important that tends to be innate in dentists, is we want to learn. We want to advance things. In private practice, it can be hard because you get busy. This works. I'm going to continue to do it this way, even though there might be another way, because that means I have to invest potentially money and time and a learning curve. And you have to be willing to open yourself up to that if you're going to keep up with all of the new things that are coming along.
So let's talk about one of the changes that we went through together. It's February of 2020. Right before the offices were shut down. We have the founder and CEO of Integrity Dental Services, Mr. Rob Dinker, come and visit our center and show us his products and what he can fabricate in the lab. And I remember meeting with him, and you met with him.
I do.
And we had worked with so many labs in the production of the full arch restoration that we were specialized in back then, and had put so many eggs into different labs, and at times all of those eggs were broken, and it was frustrating because you had to call patients and let them know, hey, we need more time, or we need to get you back in, get the bridge made. So when I met with Rob, I told him, hey, listen, we're going to start sending you some cases, but it's going to be little by little as we can confirm that the first few cases are not going to be the only great cases. It's going to be consistent. And you and I looked at this together, and we kind of vetted the production process together. What do you remember of those years, or of those few cases and those first months?
I remember a lot of conversations,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, you might want to call them doctor preferences. You know, this doesn't work. We need to do it this way. I remember a lot of changes required in contours to meet what we know the patients are going to expect, and balancing that against parameters for strength, the materials, things like that. I remember one of the bigger challenges was the soft tissue appearance, mm-hmm. and the junction of the soft tissue to the natural tooth, getting that clean. Mm-hmm. That was a little bit of an issue in the beginning. I remember having to develop different techniques to get the occlusion correct. Mm-hmm. Because we were trying to minimize the steps involved, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you got to go backwards a little bit. So we made some steps forward that we had to take some steps back. But I also remember working with a company that was completely open to all that, which made a big difference. Mm-hmm. In my career, I've had labs, obviously, that I've worked with that, you know, you ask for A and you get B. They don't want to talk to you about it. And I didn't have that experience with Rob. So when you have a collaborative situation like that is going to be promoting both businesses in a way, that's a positive. If you're working with a lab that's not open to working with you, then you probably need to be finding a different lab.
Yeah. I think we were fortunate of being able to establish two-way communication. Yes. Where both sides could talk and both sides would listen in order to be able to deliver a much better product than yes. what we were getting before. I know we worked very hard in developing the entabler surfaces that yes. we really wanted to get, but that's topic of another conversation because don't want to put our listeners to sleep right now. Let's talk about the position that you have right now. Okay. You are a mentor. Mm-hmm. Tell me how you see yourself and how you've put all this together now to take that role of mentoring new doctors or existing doctors in this network so that they can be successful.
It's funny because it kind of takes me back all the way to dental school. Not that these doctors don't have clinical skills like some of the students may or may not have had, but I love teaching and I love interacting in that way, especially one-on-one, as I mentioned earlier, and trying to be helpful in a way to avoid some mistakes I made along the way. When you've been around a while, you know, this is, I think my 40-year reunion is coming up, which is a while.
40-year reunion?
Yeah, I think it's in September. So, yeah, I'm excited about it, but I don't want to admit it's 40 years. So,
you're gonna go?
I'll go. Okay. Yeah, I'll go. It's very rewarding to share your experiences in a way that can move the needle quicker for somebody else, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, we all have a learning experience to go through when we're taking on a new job or a new role. And if I can help them make those steps faster, then it makes them successful quicker. And so it takes a number of pieces. You know, some may need a little bit more help in the clinical aspect of things. Some in the leadership aspect of things. With the way the model works at ClearChoice, maybe in the sales role, they need a little bit more help. Understanding the paperwork. So you have to kind of hone in on where the need is, which is part of my role, is to figure out where the need is, and then come up with a development plan for the doctor that will help him succeed. And that's really my goal, is to make sure that the doctors that we are onboarding or that need assistance in some way succeed. And I get a lot of satisfaction about that. You know, when somebody writes me and says, "Hey, Scott, you know, thanks, I really appreciate it. That really helped." That makes my day. I mean, I can go on and do another day. So that's just my nature, I guess. So I would just say overall, just being helpful at the success of other doctors is is really what I try to do.
That's such a full circle for you, because one of the things that you mentioned when we started talking was that you enjoyed that 1-to-1, 1-to-2 experience, and now, almost 40 years later, you're back to that.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a win for every single doctor that gets to hear you talk and be able to benefit from your experience. So I'm very happy for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Scott, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you coming now from Colorado to visit us here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the weather is a lot nicer. According to what you've told me, the last few weeks in Colorado have been miserable.
It was significantly colder when I left.
Well,
yes.
You're welcome for bringing you here. I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us and in this episode of Practicing with Integrity. Thanks for sharing your almost 40 years of career with us, career in academia, career in private practice, career in group practice, and now in mentoring. Working with you was one of the biggest treats in my career, so I appreciate that. Learned a lot from you. And I hope that our friendship keeps going on for on and on and on, and we keep sharing stories. So thank you very much. I just wish you safe travels back home whenever it is that you're heading back home.
I appreciate it. I would agree. Our relationship is a lifetime relationship.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. So for all of our listeners, please remember that you can search for a podcast on major platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Feel free to share with your colleagues, friends, and family. We look forward to learning about your comments and opinions and other topics that you would like to address, and hope we can connect on the next episode. Until then, thank you.